All right. So just to show you here, we've got the 7.5-inch Santoku and the 8-inch chef's knife. Either one of these are a good choice as a starter. Again, you want to go make sure that they're comfortable in your hand. You give me just a second here. Got some stuff cooking there. Other knives that are strongly recommended, other than the chef's knife and the Santoku, a bread knife. So this is one, and I wouldn't recommend spending a huge amount of money on a bread knife, even though you can get really expensive on them. This is something I bought at Smart and Final for about 20 bucks. Been using it for 25 years, works perfectly well on bread. You can also use it for things like slicing ham, or say you want to do an acorn squash or something large and hard. You can actually kind of saw through it with that. Here's a smaller bread knife. This one also works well on things like tomatoes, if you don't have a really good sharp knife handy. Set those aside. The last one, this is probably one of my favorite knives now. It's strictly for vegetable preparation. This is called a nikiri. If you go online, you can find quite a number of them for under $100. I like this. It's not something you would use on meat or really hard vegetables, anything that requires a certain amount of force. This is very convenient for making really thin slices from your vegetables, chopping and mincing and dicing. Then the last tool, or actually two tools everybody should have, are a decent cutting board. And there's a wide range of options out there. Wood is actually recommended. And a lot of people worry that wood will have a bacterial hazard. Turns out that most harmful bacteria die on wood very quickly. They don't last. This is plastic. I've got a bunch of plastic cutting boards because they're things I used to take out to the desert camping, and we would do a lot of cooking out there. This was something that we could have handy, scrub down easily, and then just throw it in a box and bring it back. Well, yes, that was coming up next. So this is a bamboo cutting board. I actually really like these. This is one we picked up in Arizona. We were at an Airbnb, and the tools they had there were really atrocious. They didn't have a cutting board. So we picked this up at the Stater Brothers there. I think it was $8. They hold up incredibly well. And when they do get bad, they're easily recyclable. And then bamboo, as everybody knows, it proliferates. It actually grows in San Diego County like a weed, down along the riverbeds and all of that. So bamboo works very well. If it's something you like, I would very strongly recommend it. I haven't read the scientific research on this regarding bacterial contamination. Hopefully it works like a wood cutting board does, and the bacteria actually die. With the plastic, you may have to, they can be run through the dishwasher usually. So if you put them through the dishwasher on a sterilization setting, you can clean those up real well. And then the last tool that everybody should have is some way to dress up the edge on your knife. This is a honing steel. So it doesn't necessarily do a great job on sharpening your knife. What it does is it helps to realign the edge. So if you've got a real sharp edge, your blade's going to bend over after a little bit of time. So the recommended way to do this is to put your sharpening steel on your cutting board and then run the blade of your knife down it. Give it a few strokes on each side, and that helps to sharpen it up, bring your edge back. Now, I'm going to start out with, I've done a little bit of prep already, but since we're making gumbo, almost invariably the main ingredient or the first ingredient for your gumbo is going to be sausage. And gumbo isn't necessarily the thing you want to make in a plant-forward cooking class. Luckily, that's going to happen later on. Carrie can take care of that, even though we will get into a lot of preparation of vegetables that can be used all across the range of cooking, whether you're doing plant-based cooking or not. So this here, you want to turn your sausage, and these are andouille sausage that I got at a local butcher shop. You want to turn them into coins or slices. So, and I just line up two of them. My hand isn't really big enough to do a whole lot more than that, and I don't want to drag out a much bigger knife. So you just slice through, push your knife through, and you want to make sure that you get a little of that rocking motion as well as sliding it along so that you cut through the casing. And you want to do this with anything you cut. You want to make sure that you get a clean cut all the way through. You also don't want to try and push the knife directly down through. You actually want to have that sliding motion, either forward or backward, whichever one is comfortable for you. And get all your sausage cut. And I've already, I prepped a bunch of that beforehand. And notice I've actually got two different cutting boards. So this one, it's plastic and it's got a little channel all around it. So I use that for cutting meat. Helps me from having any juices spill over onto my counter. Or if you take meat out of the oven after it's cooked, you can set it on here, let it rest, and any extraneous juices will flow into that. I'm also a little leery of cutting vegetables, especially any vegetables that aren't going to be cooked, on a cutting board that I've cut meat on and that hasn't been sanitized in between the two. So if you're going to cut something for a salad or something like that, where it's going to be eaten raw, I would definitely not do that on the same cutting board that I had just cut meat products on. Okay. Now our next step is we want to do an onion. And onions get used in, almost every cuisine on the planet. And they can be something that's really a pain to deal with, especially because this outer skin can be very slick. It's easy to slip with your knife. So you make a break through that. Thank you, Deb. Thank you. And you always want to take the end off that isn't stuck in the ground. So you want to leave the root end. This is the root end. So you want to take the other end off and then strip the skin off of the onion. And one trick I learned, I've watched probably way too many cooking shows in my life, but Rachel Ray had a great tip about keeping a container up on your countertop that you can throw your refuse into. One of the things I like, San Diego now has their green waste recycling. So they provide you with a big honking bin. There we go. They provide you with the big bin and then a smaller one that you can just keep on your countertop. Peel that skin off. And you always want to make sure you peel enough of the skin off so that you don't have that brown colored or the real papery skin. You want to get it down to the actual edible part of your onion. Okay. Now at this point here, you can do a lot of different things with your onion. If you were, say you were going to want to make onion rings or something like that, you would actually peel the skin off of your onion, cut one end off, peel the whole skin off, and then cut it into slices. Okay. If you wanted to make like quarter rounds or something, if you don't need a dice or if you want onion strips, then you can just actually take and either cut them straight down that way, or you can cut a round off like that. Okay. For the gumbo, we're actually going to do a dice. And for me, when I was first starting cooking, the thing I really hated to have to prepare was onions. I just didn't know a decent way to do it. But I learned from a friend of mine, and now I've seen this on every chef show on the planet. If you take your knife, hold it level with your cutting board, and hold it at, say, a quarter of an inch above the cutting board, this will determine the size of your dice. If you need a bigger dice, you could make fewer cuts. If you needed a finer dice, cut it an eighth of an inch, say. But take your knife, slide it through, and you don't want to push down too hard on the onion, because what you'll do is you'll actually bind your knife. Make a few cuts this way, like this. Make sure you don't get your fingers into that whole mix. Another real benefit of having a really sharp knife, they're much less likely to slip when you're cutting with them. And if they do slip and you catch yourself, you get a nice clean cut. The onion juice is going to burn like mad, but the cut's going to heal a lot more quickly and cause a lot fewer problems. Then take your knife, cut down towards the root end. Again, make these slices at the interval that you want your dice to be. So I'm running about a quarter of an inch here. Then just turn the whole thing. Again, slice it at the width that you want your dice to be. And you can see I'm getting a lot of productivity out of this here. Okay, then when you get down to the end of it, I was more of a Depression era child than I care to admit. My parents were hugely strong on not wasting things. So you just take your end bit there, clean it up, get rid of that root end. And this is a big honking onion, but we're making a pretty fair amount of gumbo here, so I am going to use the whole thing. So I do the same thing here on this one. Now, when I first started cooking, this much onion prep would have taken me 20 minutes or more. Yeah, if you want to go ahead and I can see I've got a little bit of kind of questionable onion there. So I can just peel that back, get down to the good portion of it. Another thing I like to do, since with the gumbo, you have to be ready to put all of your vegetable products. It's called a mirepoix in French. The Cajuns call it the Holy Trinity, which is diced onion, diced celery, and diced green pepper. So for our celery, take the kind of ugly ends off there, trim those off. And then I like to, you've got, celery is not a very evenly shaped vegetable when you get down to the one end of it. So I just take those little pieces off and then I'll kind of trim them up. Once I've got everything ready to go, I can add them in, even though you can see it's not very much of the celery that's coming off. Then I just slice it down the middle. If I wanted a smaller dice, I could cut each of these in half, but I'm trying to keep all of my ingredients about the same size for this. One of the reasons you do that is so that they all cook at the same rate. Then I can just pull my celery stalks together. And Deb, as the sous chef, would you take the sausage out? And there was a white bowl. There we go. Put it into that. This is so nice having a sous chef. And one thing I kind of forgot to start off with is when you're making gumbo, it's based in uh, what's called a roux, R-O-U-X. And a roux, it's from French cooking, is just a combination of some sort of fat, either oil, butter, or lard. You can use tallow, I guess, uh, and flour. And you use equal parts by volume of lard and flour. So what I did is I made my roux with 1 cup of lard. It's half of a package that you can buy in the grocery store. And 1 cup of flour. And I do that not by weight. It's not 8 ounces of each. It's the same volume. And when you're making this, you have to stir the roux constantly. So you melt your fat, then you pour your flour in, and then you have to stir it constantly. You don't get a break from that. So you want to have all of your prep work done, have your setup ready to go, so you can just dump all of those vegetable portions into the roux. Our last thing is going to be a green pepper. And we're going to do a couple of different cuts on this one. So what we do is we take the end caps off so that we have a nice band basically of pepper. And I don't like to waste the tops of this. So I cut them off, try and keep the seeds out of it as much as possible. And I can cut them into the proper width. And then just run my knife across them the other way. And you get a fairly even dice for that. Do the same with the bottom end of it. And again, you always want to keep your fingers out of the way of your knife. One of the techniques that you'll see in knife skills classes, or if you go on YouTube and go to any place like America's Test Kitchen, something like that, they want you to hold your fingers in a claw when you're holding your vegetables down. So what you want to do is turn your fingertips a little bit underneath, and then you can run the knife down the front side of your finger. Make sure that your fingertips are out of the way, lets you get things to the proper size. Since I learned that tip, I've had a lot fewer kitchen injuries, even though I'm not always 100% accurate in it. All right, then here, this is what's called a julienne. So if you cut something into strips, it's called julienne or strips. A lot of recipes now just don't even bother with the French cooking terms. They go straight to cut them into strips, even though if you do see julienne, you know that it's just turning it into strips. Then I get all my strips oriented the same way. And I can go through, cut them at the proper interval. And now I have, excuse me, my diced green pepper. And at this point, I made my roux ahead of time. I've got it hot here on the stove. So what we want to do is we want to add all of these vegetables into it. The last thing we're going to add will be garlic. We don't need to do that right now. We don't want it going into the roux right away. We want all these other vegetables to go in. You can hear I get a bit of a sizzle there. Lets me know my roux is hot. When you pour the vegetables in, it actually stops the cooking of the roux. Okay, and you want to be very careful with your roux. You want to take it to a nice dark color, but it's amazing how quickly your roux will burn. Another thing that I do is I mess up a lot of dishes when I'm doing this kind of prep, because I like to get all of my materials prepped and ready to go.
Can you all hear me at this point?
Yes.
Yes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we lost Tim when you muted your camera. We
Okay.
lost Tim.
Now, can you hear him?
Are we back?
Yeah.
I can hear me.
All right.
So what point did we lose audio?
About a minute ago.
Okay. All right. So I was just talking about, I like to have a lot of dishes that I can put my prep work in. So that I can have it all staged and ready to go. There's a French term for that. It's called mise en place, which I learned, I ran it through Google Translate the other day. And it translates directly as setup. So that you want to get everything set up. Now, for my gumbo, I like andouille sausage, which is kind of the standard, and then chicken. And a lot of people get really sketchy prepping chicken. And it does have a bad reputation by microbial contamination. So you want to be very careful handling it. All right, so, and here what we want to do, I bought boneless, skinless chicken thighs. And we just want to cut this into bite-sized pieces. And we're going to actually toss these into the pan that the sausage was browned in. Let's see.
How many people is that?
And we're just reheating that pan. You never want to put meat into a cold pan, or usually don't. So, and here, you just kind of eyeball it. And this I'm going to take and scrape directly from the cutting board into the pan. And then the cutting board goes directly into the sink. It gets sanitized. And I wash my hands. And I always use an antibacterial soap for that. And I didn't get bone-in chicken thighs because I'm the world's slowest chicken deboner. So we didn't want to spend all that time. Okay. So we've got our roux and the mirepoix cooking away over here. We want that to run for 5 or 6 minutes. Let those vegetables get nice and soft. Let them soak up each other's flavors and infuse their flavors into the roux. And again, with the chicken here, if you were making kebabs, you'd want to be a lot more careful to make sure everything's the same size so that they cook at the same time. But for this here, they're all just going to be poured in. They're going to cook for quite a while in the gumbo. So you should be hearing the sink running. This is the hand washing.
There he is.
Yes. So I worked years ago on a lawsuit that dealt with food safety and food poisoning. I read tens of thousands of pages about food safety, food production, and everything. So, and what I learned in that just scared the bejesus out of me. All right. So our last couple of ingredients to start with for the gumbo, or to finish off the gumbo, excuse me, are a spice blend. And Deb's going to send out a recipe for that. Or I use something that's available in grocery stores, everything. This is Tony Chacher's Creole spice. I use 3 tablespoons of it. And it's just because I've been doing this long enough. I know this is what works in my gumbo. And so I can toss that in here. Stir it around. And then that will start to blend with my mirepoix. That go. Now for the garlic. So you want to, I've already broken the cloves apart. And I'm not a big fan of garlic presses. And there are a couple of easier ways to do it. And one is to just take your garlic clove, put it on your cutting board. And just lightly tap it. That loosens up the skin. And lets you peel it off. Then you want to get all that papery skin off. Make sure it comes off. And there's also a tough end on that, which you can just cut off. Another way to do it, that was already peeled, is you can cut off that end with the paper still on it. And then just flip that over, don't cut all the way through. And it makes it fairly easy to peel your garlic. And there, you know, if you go to a cooking store or a hardware store, they'll actually have garlic peelers there. And it's basically just a silicone tube that you can put your garlic cloves in, press them down on the counter, roll them, and it peels that skin off. All right. Now, I'm going to turn this into a mince. So it's going to end up being fairly fine pieces of garlic. And to do that, just take your knife. You want to be careful to make sure that you don't cut yourself doing this. But set the knife down on top of the garlic, take your fist and whack it. That's a fancy technical cooking term there. Whack it. Okay. Once you've got all of this
Whacked.
whacked, and basically what it does is it turns it into individual fibers. Take your knife, run it across. Gather everything back up.
That's
you can-
exactly
yeah.
how mine looks. Exactly.
Yeah, and you can use the edge of the knife to gather it up. And take all that off, give it another good chopping there. And now we've got something that's a good size to add into our gumbo here. All right. And from that point there, I can clean up this cutting board. We're actually going to make a little more. We're going to make a caprese salad, but it's going to be modified. Oops. So usually you go to an Italian restaurant, something like that, and they will give you sliced tomatoes with basil, a basil leaf, and a slice of mozzarella. And then they'll drizzle balsamico and olive oil on top of it, little salt and pepper. I have quite a few friends who are lactose intolerant. And so adding the mozzarella was, something they didn't like. And then for me, I always found it to be a royal pain in the butt to have to try and get a bite, cut the salad so that I got equal amounts of tomato,
You're on the big camera.
yeah, tomato, basil, and mozzarella all together. So one evening I was working in the kitchen, decided I didn't want to do that. I didn't want everybody to have to pick, let's see. And I brought them, sorry about that. I brought a bowl to make this in. So I decided I was going to just cut up my tomatoes, do a chiffonade of the basil. We'll show you what that is. Toss all of that in a bowl. Add my dressing, which is the balsamic and olive oil. And then let anybody else who wanted the mozzarella add the little pearl mozzarella balls. And so that way they get the whole concept of caprese without the inconvenience. Okay. So starting on our tomatoes, we want to take the hull out. That's the point where it connects to the vine. For that, you want to grab your paring knife. This is the 4-inch paring knife we started out with early on. And take that hull out. And these are heirloom tomatoes, which generally tend to be much more flavorful than a lot of what you can buy in the grocery stores. So I really like my heirloom tomatoes. And I kind of want to check and see if there's some stuff there that might not be perfectly edible. Clean that up. Get it ready to go. And then if I wanted to make slices of this, I could just stand my tomato on its edge, make sure I've got a really nice sharp knife, and cut through like that. Okay, so this would be my start for a traditional caprese. But here I don't want to do that. I'm actually going to cube this. So I can just take my knife, stack it up, and run my knife across it like this. And here I've got strips. Or come back through. Kind of use my hand, my fist to gather it up. Move that off into a bowl. And now this is a prep you could use if you were doing something like shakshuka, spaghetti sauce, any sort of marinara. Again, keep that vegetarian. Doing summer salads. One great way to do this is you can make a spring pasta dish just by kind of cutting up your tomato and then sauteing it in some olive oil, add in some basil, a little bit of salt and pepper, and you've actually got a pretty good tomato sauce. Another way to do it, let me take that little piece out. You can also, if you wanted to say like do tomato wedges for your salad, just, turn the tomato that way. Cut through. And remember, when you're dealing with tomatoes, you want to have a very sharp knife. Otherwise, it'll just slide along the skin. You'll end up just crushing your tomato. And you end up with an ugly end product, shall we say. But these get you to bite-sized pieces. As you can see, it's fairly quick. Okay, Deb, if you want to add the chicken and the sausage to the pot. Okay. And I'm not used to having help in the kitchen usually. So Deb, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Whoops, I'm getting a little sloppy here with this, I apologize. What are you doing for time?
We got about 15 minutes.
Okay, this will all come together right on time.
Mhm.
And so we want to do our chiffonade of the basil. And for this, you want to have your herbs nice and dry. And for these, I don't chop the basil. I'm just going to slice it into strips. Okay, so take your basil leaves. I washed these earlier. It helps to have them dry. And just,
So you dried them, you washed them and then put them in paper towels, is that what you did, and then in the
Mhm.
fridge?
yeah. And I used a salad spinner to start with to dry them off. Right. So you just take your basil. And this would not be a way to make pesto, by the way. And to make this easy, just roll it almost like a cigar. Okay. Then take your knife, and now we're we.
Yeah, you're on that camera. You're good.
Okay. So, and then just slice through. Keep your slices fairly uniform. And so there, we've got nice strips of basil. They haven't been crushed. And if you crush your herbs too much, they kind of turn black and can get kind of gummy and make a less than ideal salad or whatever you're making. Go ahead and clean up a little bit. Now, if your cutting board has a tendency to slip, I know my cutting boards don't, but a couple of things you can do is you can use a pad underneath it. This is just a shelf liner that I bought at Bed Bath & Beyond. Works very well for it. Or just wet a paper towel, put it on the counter, and then put your cutting board on top of that. Okay. Oh, whoops. All right, I didn't realize that was open. So Deb, if you would stir that around, take the fond off of the bottom.
So it happens when you have a sous chef that
Yeah.
opens the
That's too efficient. Sorry. That's our Julia Child moment. That fun never ends. And that's another good reason to keep your paper towels convenient. All right, so our last step for the caprese salad, take a couple of tablespoons of balsamic vinegar and then some olive oil. And let's see, I had a little tiny whisk over here. Oh,
right there.
it's actually in the measuring cup. Add in some pepper. I really like freshly ground pepper. And again, I'm using my $9 OXO pepper grinder. And Deb, you can go ahead and pour the chicken stock into the gumbo. Just a little bit of salt. And you can adjust this after you've made your toss your salad together. Kind of stir that up, get it whisking pretty good. And then just add a couple of tablespoons of olive oil to it. And if you're really picky, you can add that more slowly and really try to emulsify the whole thing. Thank you. Once that's done, just pour it over your tomatoes and basil. Get that off the countertop there. Grab a spoon. Stir that around. And you send that over to the table to be served. And so that's
It's over here. I'll read this one.
okay. So we've got our nice colors, basically a very simple salad. And when you're working with gumbo,
It tends to be a little cholesterol intensive. So any vegetables you can add to the whole thing are greatly appreciated. Then another tradition with gumbo is to use okra. So you can buy the okra pods. I picked these up at Sprouts this morning. They're fresh, organic. And for the okra,
I'm gonna switch you back.
and you don't want to add your okra until the very end of your cooking. So you want it to simmer, but you just cut the end off and then slice it into coins. Okay, and okra adds a little bit of flavor and a lot of thickening to your gumbo. So some people are not fans of okra because it can be a little bit slimy. There is a way to deslime it, but I forgot to look it up on the internet too. Okay. So a couple of our last things here, last knife skills options are to do a julienne, turn a carrot into matchsticks. And you can do this with any of your vegetables. Another good option, zucchini or potatoes. And let's see. So you do want to peel the carrot. Here we go, sorry. And I've got a number of different peelers. So, and one of a chef's best friends is a really good sharp peeler. A lot of my stuff, I'm a big fan of sur la table because you can go in and you can actually get your hands on the devices and test them out, make sure they fit. But otherwise, this I picked up in one of the Indian hardware stores in Artesia. So with your carrot, you've got a bunch of different options. So if you were to put these into a salad, you might want to turn them into coins. And you can make your coin whatever thickness you want. So you can get it from super thin on up to that size. If you were going to put these in a stew or a pot roast or something like that, you'd want to cut them into bigger chunks. All right, so probably something like that would actually work. But if you wanted to do these in a stir fry or some healthy salad, something like that, and you wanted to turn them into matchsticks, cut it to the length you want, and then you want to flatten at least one side of it. So you cut that off, gives you a nice stable base. Okay, and then you can slice it into slices. Then turn these on the side, get a flat piece down, and then you can do your matchsticks. So you can see I've got fairly uniform pieces there. Or if you need a dice, just turn them. So, and this started out as a julienne. But now if I wanted a dice that I could use in almost anything, risotto, bucatini, amatriciana, just take them.
If we knew what those were.
Sorry, my apologies.
Or a basic salad.
Basic
or
salad, anything.
Soup or.
So you can get your dice going that way. All right.
We got a couple more minutes and then questions.
Okay, last one. We won't get to a potato. Even though to do a potato, you can do basically the same thing as with the carrot. Say you want to turn your potato into French fries or into a dice. Just go through that same basic process. cut the potato kind of square, keep them stacked, and then cut them to the sizes you want. Okay. Last one, I'm a big fan of zucchini. Have been ever since I was a kid. Green beans and zucchini were the only things I like. So you can start out if you want a full round. You know, just slice it like that. Or you can slice them really thin. Or say you wanted to do half slices or quarter slices. Say you were going to roast them, I would recommend using a half round. So you can just cut those like that. Take your half rounds off. If you wanted to do quarters, just cut these down the middle. And if you wanted to do sticks, you could cut each of those in a quarter. Something, if you were preparing a canapé tray, you could cut these in half and then cut them in another strip. Or here. So here you get your quarter. You know, and these, if I wanted to use them in the, I get something like that, that could go on a canapé tray. Or cook. But if you wanted to add something to a salad, either the coins or the quarter would be an appropriate thing. Keep them a bite size, you know, and minimize the amount of hardware your guests need at their place setting.
Awesome. So we have some questions.
Okay.
One of the questions was, where do you sharpen your knives in San Diego, or get your knives sharpened in San Diego?
Well, you just had to ask. So I tend to be a bit of a gadget geek. And so I have a couple of different, this is my new toy. I had a very expensive knife that had a damaged blade. So I bought a whetstone. So you actually soak this in water. It's got 2 grits and you can sharpen your knife. Or this is a ceramic knife sharpener. It's got 2 different grades of abrasive. And these pop into the, you know, and this works pretty well. It's nice and safe. It's quick and it's easy. And
How
it's
would
got
you use
beautiful-
it? Can you show us how to use it?
Okay, sure.
'Cause I have no idea. Those look like a TV antenna, old school TV antenna.
Yes.
I would not know what to do with them.
Okay. So the blue is the coarser unit.
I'm gonna
So-
change you to it.
Yeah.
You're closer
and get the-
camera, so I'm giving you the closer view here.
Yeah.
There we
Okay.
go. All right.
So you put your sharpening rods in and then just run the knife down. Do that as many times as it takes until you can run your finger along the blade, excuse me, and not feel any burrs. Okay, and you want to be pretty careful about the angle you run it at. All right, and then, so that's my coarser grit on it. Then I want to swap out for the fine grit. And the fine grit's going to put the actual edge on it, my permanent edge. So again, you put them in. And Whole Foods, I think, still has a knife sharpener come once a month. Another option, my favorite butcher shop, which is Cecil's, which is in off of Marina Boulevard.
protector?
Oh, yeah, actually, your hand should be underneath that. Thank you. Thanks, Deb. So there, you get a nice, really sharp blade on that, or sharp edge. Another option is Cecil's or Iowa Meat Farms, because they have monthly knife sharpening as well. Okay, and I would recommend, if you know, pick up something like this. And they've got electric knife sharpeners. I would be really reluctant to use one of those because they take off a lot of metal.
We're back.
So you'll wear your knife off really quickly. But Cecil's, Iowa Meat Farms, or Whole Foods, and sometimes farmers markets will have a knife sharpener show up. And another option there, a lot of the knife sharpeners that go to those things make their own blades and sell them. And I got one really nice knife in one of those situations. So,
All right. Thank you, Tim. Any questions? You guys, you can unmute at this point. We're not that official here, so.
standing on ceremony.
Exactly. Oh, can you demonstrate how to use the whetstone?
Certainly.
It's not gonna be soaked, but
Yeah. So what you want to do is soak this in water for 10 minutes or so until the bubbles stop coming up. And then keep a little dish of water handy while you're sharpening to re-wet the stone if necessary. And this one actually came with a guide to set the angle for your knife. And so you would slide the blade over your knife, or the angle, excuse me. And then you start out with the coarser grit, which is the 1000, so the blue side. And then you'd want to have this set on a table.
you can set it over there. I can switch it.
Okay.
Here, let me switch him so you all can see what he's doing.
Okay.
Hang on. Okay.
Okay. So take 2 fingers or 3 fingers. Start your angle tool on the edge of the honing stone or whetstone, and then just push it across. And you can actually hear that it's taking some metal off. And you'd want to have that wet. And just do that a few times. And then switch it over. Go the other way. Keep a certain amount of pressure on it. And once you've got that pretty sharp, and this knife's in pretty good shape already, then you can just turn this over. This is the 6000 grit side. Put it back in your machine, and then do the same thing. You know, maybe apply a little less pressure. And then that'll give you a really nice, sharp edge. I spent about a half an hour reconditioning the blade of the one that I had damaged. The stone worked very well. And now that knife is scary sharp. So.
All right. All right. Any other questions? It's time for dinner now.
Looks great.
Questions? No questions? I know we had a few, but thank you. A lot of thank yous.
See what the gumbo looks like?
Yeah, let me switch. You'll be able to see that he's gonna take you into the gumbo. Just one second. So
Ooh, yum.
can y'all see it? There you go.
So that's our.
Yep. It's the
And just-
gumbo.
Yeah. Just put in a plug for one of my favorite cooking tools, which is the big Le Creuset pot. Enameled steel. And one of the reasons I like this, especially for gumbo, is when you're making your roux, you have to see how the color changes. And since it has a light interior, you can get your roux to the proper darkness without burning it. So.
Cool. So I'll send out the recipe for what we did today. We'll also have some links and some suggestions on the different knives that Tim recommended, the sizes and that sort of thing. I know that he went into Sur La Table and there's a sale happening on kitchen tools, not knives, but kitchen tools and the cookware. But one of the nice things about Sur La Table is that they'll let you try out the knives. So you can see if it's, the right size or the weight or whatever. So unlike if we go online and do it on Amazon, you're not gonna, you don't know if it works or not. So that was a benefit of Surlatov, and there was one other place that you suggested that. you could- I can't remember.
Oh, Smart and Final. And for bread, like a bread knife or something. And you can get a reasonably good chef's knife there at a lower price, but it's not gonna last as long as the Victorinox or Zwilling or Henkel's.
Victorinox is one of his favorites, so
Yes,
I liked because that's a Swiss Army knife, and I can use a Swiss Army knife. Not
Yeah.
all of these, but I can use a Swiss Army knife. So,
Yeah.
but I'll send that out. You'll get an information. You'll get the little link with that stuff on it after. And if there's no other questions, let's go eat. Bon appetit, everybody.
Thank you.
thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Deb.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
You.